I now recognize Ms. Malliotakis from New York for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Major General, for being here today. We appreciate your testimony. I want to focus on, again, the nation's stockpile, right, for preparedness. Obviously, during COVID, there were a lot of things that were wrong with regards to not having enough PPE, ventilators, hand sanitizer, pharmaceuticals. And we face this issue now, not even with the pandemic, right? We know that the USA has a shortage of 250 pharmaceutical drugs, including chemotherapies, including antibiotics. We know that we rely on India and China for active pharmaceutical ingredients that make up about 70% of our generics. So whether it's a pandemic or just everyday life, I think we need to be doing more to ensure that we're having an adequate supply of our necessary drugs, and that we're producing those active pharmaceutical ingredients here in the United States and not depending on communist China for them. And so my question is, how are you working in a cross-section perhaps with HHS or other agencies to address this issue? Because I'd really like to work with, I know we all do, want to work with you. And I'm also a member of the Ways and Means Committee. And as such, I think we can be examining some of our tax policies, maybe some incentives to bring that manufacturing home to the United States. So I'd love to hear from your perspective on what you guys are already working to address this issue.
Congresswoman, thank you. And I think you've gotten to one of these really important preparedness issues that has been a focus of mine long before coming to this role. You're absolutely right that we need to understand our supply chains. We need to understand not only where the finished product is assembled, but also where all the ingredients and the parts and pieces that constitute that product come from, and whether we'll have ready access to those on a good day or on the next worst day in American history. And so that ongoing work has been started before our office was stood up. The National Economic Council, the Domestic Policy Council, and many departments and agencies are involved in that. We have become heavily involved in that, and I'm very pleased to share with you that we've brought on board some subject matter experts to our team specifically to help integrate those efforts on medical supply chain in support of that broader supply chain effort across the whole of government. I think, as you described, there are going to be multiple levers that are available to be pulled, and what we are working on collaboratively across the government and with other stakeholders is to identify which will have the greatest impact. There was a reference made earlier to international partners, and it's clear that if every country tries to double down on producing the same 4 or 5 things, we may all be successful on those 4 or 5, but the remaining 200 that you mentioned, for example, won't be addressed. And so there's opportunities to collaborate not only across the U.S. government and with our domestic partners, but also with our international partners to understand where they're making investments to enhance supply chains, especially with key allies like the United Kingdom, Japan, Korea, and others. So I think there's tremendous opportunity to leverage the work that's been done over the last several years, informed by the lessons from COVID and the work that you described, to continue to improve our preparedness.
So our committee in Ways and Means is also very focused on this, and I do believe it's going to require some type of incentive, some type of tax incentives to bring these manufacturers back to the United States. It makes it difficult when we're competing with communist China that's subsidizing complete industries. And so we've also been working with our neighboring countries, or speaking with other countries about how we can, if not onshore, friendshore, but we certainly shouldn't be relying on the communist Chinese for pharmaceutical, that any day they could decide they want to cut off supply and we would see millions of Americans die as a result. So I really urge you, the administration, to make this a priority. I mean, it seems like you're already working on it, but we really need, I think, to take appropriate steps to get that supply going here in the United States. Now, with regards to a pandemic, are you working with, as we saw, alcohol companies started producing hand sanitizers during COVID, and people really stepped up. Are we putting together, I guess, an inventory of manufacturers that can step up in the event that we do need to mass produce therapeutics, pharmaceuticals, PPE in the future?
Congresswoman, thanks. So several points that you raised. I'll try and answer all of them there. First, in the report that we had discussed earlier, we will describe where we've been able to capture those sorts of exigent changes that were made within the U.S. industrial base to support our response during the last pandemic so that we can highlight what we did and how we did it and have that ready to go in the future, or what it would take to keep that ready to go in the future. There's also the question of investments in sustaining production capability here in the United States for things that may not always be needed in the same quantity and in between pandemics as they are in pandemics. And then, as you said, the series of incentives to incent the purchase of things that are purchased here in the United States, which this administration is already working on. So I'm eager to work with you and others on that as we go forward as part of this whole of government effort.
Thank you very much.